the one that closes our program. We want to thank the Embassy of the Philippines that has developed the program, and we are sure that this topic, so sensitive and so hot for the governance of that area of the world, will be of your interest. As usual, there will be a presentation, and then you are free to make questions. So thank you to everybody, and I will see you next year in October for the 17th edition. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Giorgio Bartolomucci, the founder and Secretary General of Festival Diplomazia. To continue our program this afternoon and to deliver his welcome remarks, it is now my honor to invite a seasoned diplomat who has been and continues to be a strong advocate for elevating Philippines-Italy relations and promoting Philippine interests and values around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Philippine Ambassador to Italy, Ambassador Neil Imperial.
Dr. Giorgio Bartolomucci, founder and Secretary General of Festival della Diplomazia, Dr. Stefano Pelaggi from Sapienza University in Rome, and Dr. Lorenzo Termine, University of International Studies in Rome and Sapienza University. Ladies and gentlemen, buongiorno a tutti. When Dr. Giorgio Bartolomucci invited the Philippine Embassy to this year's Festival Diplomazia under the sub-theme Multilateralism in Crisis, What Future for the Global Social Order, I immediately said yes. The Philippines could certainly share its views and experiences obtained in championing right over might and in believing that regional and international peace and stability could be won by placing its trust in multilateral institutions, in international law, and abiding by a rules-based international order. In partnership with Festival Diplomazia, it is both an honor and a privilege for the Embassy to organize this roundtable discussion, a dialogue dedicated to promoting a deeper understanding of the situation in the West Philippine Sea and the broader South China Sea, and to examining its implications for peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region. The Philippines firmly believes that diplomacy, dialogue, and cooperation are vital in addressing the complex challenges facing our maritime domain. The developments in the West Philippine Sea are not only a concern for the Philippines, but also for all nations that depend on the South China Sea and the broader Indo-Pacific for trade, security, and the free movement of people and goods. A couple of years ago, Italy started its pivot to the Indo-Pacific. We are particularly pleased to note the interest of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, as well as the focus of the Chamber of Deputies in crafting Italy's very own Indo-Pacific strategy. This initiative reflects Italy's growing recognition of the region's strategic significance and of the need for active engagement in ensuring that the Indo-Pacific remains free, open, and stable. Italy has shown its keen interest in our region through statements made in the G7 and the European Union and through defense cooperation. In the past couple of years, we noted the goodwill visits of the Italian Navy offshore patrol vessel Francesco Morosini to the Philippines in 2023. Then the aircraft carrier Cavour visited the Philippines in August and September 2024. And in August 2024 also, the frigate Alpino engaged in bilateral exercises with the United States in the Philippine seas and then made a goodwill visit in Manila in September. Most recently, in March 2025, the frigate Marcelia, I hope I pronounced that right, visited the Philippines as part of an Indo-Pacific campaign. It conducted maritime exercises, including a passing exercise with the Philippine Navy to strengthen naval cooperation, promote diplomatic ties, and to conduct freedom of navigation uh, and overflight exercises. We hope that today's conversations will provide valuable insights as Italy formulates its own Indo Pacific policy, one guided by shared principles, respect for international law, the peaceful settlement of disputes, and a commitment to a rules based order. Allow me to take this opportunity to express, on behalf of the government of the Philippines, our deep appreciation for the support and solidarity extended by Italy and the European Union. The consistent messages of support from our European partners, affirming the importance of international law and freedom of navigation and overflight, are important to us. They demonstrate a shared understanding that aggressive actions and coercion in the South China Sea threaten not only one nation's sovereignty and maritime entitlements, but also regional peace, stability, and prosperity. At the heart of the Philippines' position is the 2016 Arbitral Award. The award is a clear affirmation of the value of multilateral, rules based solutions to maritime disputes. It clarifies the maritime entitlements of states in accordance with international law, namely the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, and it upholds the principle that all nations, large or small, are equal before the law. The Philippines regards the arbitral award not only as a valid legal victory, but as an important contribution to regional peace and security. It reaffirms that the seas must remain spaces of cooperation and lawful use, governed by the principles enshrined in UNCLOS, the Constitution of the Oceans. Ladies and gentlemen, to enrich our discussion today, it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. J. Batongbakal. Dr. Batongbakal is a leading expert in maritime law and policy, currently serving as the director of the Institute for Maritime Affairs and the Law of the Sea at the University of the Philippines. He has been at the forefront of research and advocacy on maritime governance, ocean law, and the South China Sea issues. His insights have guided policymakers, scholars, and practitioners not only in the Philippines, but across the region. We are grateful for his willingness to share his insights and expertise with us today. We wish to thank also Dr. Stefano Pelagi and Dr. Lorenzo Termine, both distinguished scholars and academics of the Sapienza University of Rome, who graciously agreed to be our discussants today to share their insights on the lecture of Dr. Batongbakal. Grazie mille.
Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Dr. J. L. Batumbakal.
Thank you. Thank you. To our honored hosts, esteemed colleagues and guests, students and scholars and future specialists in this field, good morning. I'm sorry, good day, good afternoon already. Sorry, my jet lag is still in effect. Okay, thank you for taking the time to listen to this talk on the topic. Oops, where is the on the topic that I've been tasked to speak about, safeguarding multilateralism and upholding international law in the West Philippine Sea. Now, this, of course, deals with certain issues, but first we must start off with familiarizing you with the Philippines for those who are not as well acquainted in that area. The Philippines is a maritime and archipelagic nation, and it is in Southeast Asia. It is basically comprised of fragmented lands and seas. And it is this maritime and archipelagic character that presents to us certain challenges that are not faced or perhaps not as familiar to what has historically been continental countries and a continental perspective. For a maritime and archipelagic nation, the seas are are not that different from the land in terms of our attitudes and our policies. And we try as much as possible to try to protect these seas and our interests in them. However, we are also faced with with the inherent challenge that is that the sea is not always completely and totally under our control, and its usage is not as easy to secure as the land. The seas of the country, even though they are adjacent, even though they're inter-island in character, are still connected with the global ocean. And this special character means that even our seas, we have to contend with uses and passage of other countries within them, which have historically been taking place. Now, this presents us with a very different challenge, especially since we are a relatively smaller nation with a little bit less resources and less available power compared to others. Nonetheless, we have tried to, historically, we have tried to rise to that challenge. Now, the Philippines most recently took the step of implementing the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea through the enactment of the Philippine Maritime Zones Act, which basically converts the provisions of UNCLOS into domestic legislation. And this is our way of implementing the convention to which we signed and ratified. And through this, we hope to be able to secure our interests through means that are recognized under international law. Now, the West Philippine Sea, which you mentioned, is the current focus of our challenges. It is the western side of the archipelago. It's basically our exclusive economic zone and continental shelf under international law, as well as the territorial seas around some of the separate island territories that we have. And so when we say West Philippine Sea, it is not synonymous to the South China Sea, but it basically refers to our part of the South China Sea under international law. If you were to measure the various maritime zones and compare them with our land area, you can immediately see that there is a huge disparity, around 300,000 square kilometers of land compared to up to 2.2 million square kilometers of waters. And so that, again, underscores our maritime and archipelagic character. Essentially, our future, our resources are largely in our sea areas. And that is one of the key reasons for our extensive maritime interests. Now, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, of course, is international law. It's part of international law. It's now an evolving system, an evolving legal regime. Although most people, when they say UNCLOS, what comes to mind is the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which entered into force in 1994. Since that time, there have been 3 more conventions that try to address the governance of the oceans. The most recent being the 2023 Convention on Biological Diversity Beyond National Jurisdiction. So the shortcut is BBNJ, which will enter into force next year in January. And this really underscores our need to try to pursue and secure our interests within this system of international law, because that is the only way by which we will be able to do so as a smaller and less powerful nation. UNCLOS, for those of you who are not as familiar with it, is an extensive system of rules that tries to govern the activities of states in the sea, most especially in the so-called maritime zones, the areas that are closest to them. And these have been identified as the territorial sea, contiguous zone, exclusive economic zone, and continental shelf. But it also deals with the high seas and the many different activities that take place in the ocean, such as fishing, maritime trade, energy exploration, exploitation, and so on. Now, UNCLOS tries to provide the framework for governing those activities. The main challenge for a developing country, which is also a maritime archipelagic nation, is vividly illustrated in this in this map that you see there, the fact that our waters are crisscrossed, no, and used by basically every other seafaring nation in the world. And this presents us with the incredible challenge of governing not only our own national activities, but also trying to govern international uses of our oceans. Now, there you can then surmise that our reliance on UNCLOS is key. And cooperation, international cooperation through the rules of UNCLOS is essential for us to be able to pursue and protect our interests in our oceans. And these interests are quite wide and varied. Food security is one thing, which is closely tied to our environmental security. Our seas host the three most productive coastal ecosystems in the world: coral, mangrove, and seagrass beds. And they support diverse marine organisms, including fisheries, which produce quite a lot of our food fish. And our food security is inherently tied to these resources, because more than half of our of our municipalities and cities, actually about 2/3 of our cities and half of our municipalities, are coastal in nature. And our people, especially the poorest of the poor, the coastal fishing communities, have direct access to the sea to derive their basic sustenance. In addition to that, of course, we have our interest in maritime trade. It is through the sea that we are able to integrate our different islands into one country. It is through domestic maritime trade that we got integrated into one Republic of the Philippines. And it is also through trade, through maritime trade, this time through international trade, that we are able to become a member of the international community and participate in the global economy. And you see there from the map, again, if you were to focus on the West Philippine Sea, you'll see why it is very important for us for those seas to remain free and open under the current state of international law. And if those seas were to become the exclusive territory under the control of any one nation, not under international law, but purely on the basis of their domestic interests and legislation, essentially the Philippines would be hostage to that nation. The same goes for even our aerial linkages. It's probably even more, our interest is even heightened with respect to the air, because as you can see, our connections to the Asian mainland by air all go through the West Philippine Sea, especially the ones that go directly to the biggest cities. Again, if the airspace above the West Philippine Sea were to become the territory of any one country, then our country will be hostage to that nation's whims as well. Now, with respect to energy and economic security, our interests are just as high. We've spoken about our environmental and fisheries resources. With respect to energy resources, the potential is just as high. If there is any oil or gas to be found in the Philippines, according to the oil companies, it is most likely to be found in the West Philippine Sea. Unfortunately, on account of the disputes that have heightened recently, especially since the 2010s, we have been unable to even explore for petroleum resources in that area, not as much as we want, even though before that, from the 1970s up to the 2010s, we had been focusing all our exploration efforts in that region. Most recently, this has become a very important topic of interest. It is also through the West Philippine Sea that our country basically connects to the global internet. And now with the ubiquity of the internet, data transmissions, etc., no national economy can survive without being connected with the global data system here. And so you see here from this map of submarine cables, the Philippines is also connected to the rest of the world through the West Philippine Sea. And I'm sure that here in this part of the world, having seen events surrounding the Russia-Ukraine conflict, you are quite aware now of how important these and submarine cables are for any nation that transmits data for whatever purpose, whether it's civilian or military. And this underscores, again, our key interest in that area. Now, on top of all of that, we also still have unexplored and untapped marine resources. After all, as a maritime archipelagic nation, yes, we are under international law entitled to national zones of jurisdiction. But even within our own laws, we have divided and allocated jurisdiction over activities at down to the local level. So we have, for example, municipal waters, which are under the fisheries jurisdiction of the cities and municipalities. And recently, as part of a peace agreement with the Southern Muslim secessionists of old, we established regional waters for the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao. So this is an important aspect of that peace agreement, down on the southern part of the country. So with all of these maritime interests, you can understand, therefore, why the Philippines in 2012, in 2013, and 2016 prosecuted a rather controversial case, shall we say, against China for the vindication of our rights in the West Philippine Sea. Before this arbitration was pursued, our problem was simply this. The Philippines argued that it was entitled to these maritime zones, especially the exclusive economic zone in continental shelf, extending up to 200 nautical miles from its coastlines. And as I mentioned earlier, many of our interests are really key in this area. The problem is that China was claiming most of the South China Sea. And this claim, the extent of this claim was illustrated in the so-called 9-dash line map. And you see there on the screen how they overlap. The problem that this presented was that for the Philippines, therefore, during that time, there was quite a lot of legal uncertainty. The only thing we could be sure of was that we had rights and entitlements recognized by international law up to that narrow area. But with respect to the area that was enclosed within the Chinese claim, there was uncertainty because UNCLOS and the courts at the time, the tribunal decisions at the time, did not address the question of whether or not China could still make such an expansive claim. That meant that our rights and entitlements to our EEZ and continental shelf were under a great cloud of doubt. And in that case, therefore, we could not secure investments, for example. We could not get international cooperation. We could not be assured of assistance from other countries in trying to govern this area because it was subject to the unilateral claim of China. Okay? And so the arbitration sought to remove that uncertainty. And we were basically victorious. From 12 July 2016, the tribunal ruled in our favor, and that meant that we were fully entitled to the 200-mile EEZ and continental shelf, as well as the resources there. These were vindicated. Our rights to these were vindicated. We could even extend it a little bit more if we use the procedure in UNCLOS for making a claim for an extended continental shelf. And so this meant that our rights and entitlements, most especially to the natural resources in this area, were to be assured under international law. Okay. Now, of course, the decision, the award dealt only with the maritime rights and entitlements. It did not deal with the territorial or sovereignty issues. Those remain pending. Those were not resolved. But at least the legal uncertainty in this area was reduced to only those small enclaves, essentially only the islands and their surrounding territorial seas. For the waters around them, the rights were clearly allocated. And this is why, for the Philippines, essentially, the maritime disputes have been resolved. It's only the territorial disputes that still remain. Now, China, on the other hand, could only make a claim in accordance with international law. And that meant that insofar as claims to marine resources and jurisdiction in the oceans, they were pushed back to their 200-mile exclusive economic zone and continental shelf. extending from their southern coast. Now, the arbitration award is available online. It's recommended reading because you can learn about international law simply from going through its 501 pages. Yes, it's 501. It's good cure for insomnia. Okay. Okay. But the key takeaways can be boiled down to three. It's very long. There are many submissions, but the most important rulings are basically one, China could not validly make such an expansive and excessive claim to the entire South China Sea. That was essentially invalidated. And it could no longer survive the entry into force of UNCLOS. The Philippines was entitled to its full 200-mile EEZ and continental shelf measured from its baselines. And with respect to the disputes between the Philippines and China, all that remained were basically the territorial disputes around the islands and high tide elevations in that sea area. So that is why it is very important for us. However, despite that victory, unfortunately, the PRC has insisted on its position, refused to abide by the award, and instead continued to assert its claimed rights all the way up to the full extent of the 9-dash line. This graphic that you see here is basically a record of their patrol vessels for one particular year. I believe it's around 2022. And you see that what they've been doing is to establish consistent, continuous, and persistent presence of their forces, military, paramilitary, and some civilian, ostensibly civilian, but actually militia forces. And what they're doing is trying to occupy effectively, well, sort of occupy, because technically you cannot occupy the sea. But through the persistent presence of these vessels, they're pushing out legitimate Philippine activities, whether it's civilian or government. And more recently, this effort has been expanding. Before, they were only preventing our fishermen from approaching within 10 nautical miles of some reefs, for example. Then it expanded to 25. As of this year, it's now 35 nautical miles around each of these reefs that they're trying to secure. The operations have also now elevated from the sea. It's no longer just the sea that they're trying to exclude us from. They've also begun operating drones and combat aircraft to exclude us from the air as well around these key areas. So what they're doing essentially is that despite the legal victory that we secured, they're trying to make it completely ineffective through sheer force and intimidation. This is a great disappointment for us, especially since when the UNCLOS was being negotiated, China was on the side of the Philippines and other developing nations in advocating for an exclusive economic zone and expanding the continental shelf. The maritime powers, chiefly the United States and Russia at the time, were quite happy with keeping the territorial seas and the sovereignty of the states as close to the shore as possible, advocating nearly 3 nautical mile territorial seas for the most part. But eventually, because of the negotiating positions of the developing countries, among whom were China, they had to relent and compromise and recognize rights to the 200-mile EEZ and continental shelf. Now, China, therefore, in the negotiations were with us as a developing country, taking positions against the former colonial powers, taking positions against the maritime powers of the time. And that was thought to be a major victory when they conceded. Unfortunately now, China, being the maritime power in the region, has reversed its stand effectively. It being the maritime power, it now seems to be denying us, as well as the surrounding Southeast Asian states around the South China Sea, of their rights to the EEZ and continental shelf. So this is effectively a territorialization of the South China Sea, which is contrary to international law and so far unprecedented. When you tie it with the actual activities that are undertaking to try to enforce their unilateral claim. And for us, what this really implies is the creation of a modern colonial or imperial relationship between the smaller Southeast Asian nations and the regional hegemon. it requires that we defer to the PRC's security interests in this area because they want to have control over the South China Sea and the surrounding sea areas to protect themselves from any potential adversary. It implies an economic monopolization and dominance of economic activities at sea. And this was seen in the fact that when they suggested provisions for the Code of Conduct being negotiated with ASEAN, beginning in 2013, they started to propose that Southeast Asia agree that they will not partner with any other nation other than China when it comes to economic activities in this sea region. And this is very, very much a concern for us, having been former colonies. This implies that we are being forced to accept a situation of political subservience, even though China offers economic benefits from that relationship. Every empire has its own justification. The Spaniards came with God, the Americans came with public education. Here, what we see is China coming with supposedly economic boons. However you look at it, it would still be an imperial relationship. Most recently, China's actions have taken a much more aggressive and very physical turn. Starting 2022, it was no longer just threatening radio messages or rather dangerous maneuvers, risky maneuvers. They resorted then to actual ramming and interference with our government vessels, as you see on the screen, in an effort to try to intimidate the Philippines out of its areas. They've taken to using water cannon, high-pressure water cannon, to destroy communications and navigation equipment on board government vessels so that they will be disabled and forced to go back. Our Coast Guard vessels have been daily harassed with dangerous maneuvers, again, contrary to basic rules of seamanship. And even in the air, their combat aircraft have taken to intimidating our patrol aircraft through dangerous intercepts. And all the while, their civilian, ostensibly civilian fleets, but which we know are their maritime militia, have been saturating all of the reefs and low tide elevations in the West Philippine Sea. All of it in an effort to exclude even our fishermen from just simply fishing for their subsistence there. Last year, these activities hit a peak with an illegal use of force. 8 Chinese boats attacked 2 Philippine Navy vessels that were resupplying a lone outpost on one of these reefs. The violence resulted in the loss of 1 finger on the part of the Philippine Navy soldier, and the destruction of their boats. The Chinese actually used knives and pickaxes, and even as you see on the lower right, dragged basically the Philippine vessel out to sea with the crew still on board. And we do not know what fate awaited them had it not been for the intervention of the Philippine Coast Guard in negotiating the release of that small vessel. Last month, it's already last August. Okay, it's already October, I keep forgetting. This was the latest incident. While a PLA Navy destroyer and a China Coast Guard cutter were trying to squeeze a Philippine Coast Guard vessel in between them, or perhaps also run them over, instead they collided with each other at high speed. No? The China Coast Guard vessel, as you see on the screen, lost its bow from the impact. Reportedly, 2, perhaps 3 people died because of that, and many were injured. The Philippine Coast Guard vessel was rather lucky because the PLA Navy vessel missed it by just a few feet, as you see in the video. It would have been catastrophic for the Philippine Navy vessel, which was much smaller than these 2 Chinese vessels. But that shows you how dangerous the situation is because of the aggressive activities being undertaken by the Chinese maritime forces in that area. All of it just to enforce their unilateral and illegal claim. Now, the Philippines and Italy we're here because I was invited here because it was thought that this would be a good idea to try to explore areas of mutual interest and cooperation. And I think these interests are quite familiar. The freedom of navigation and maritime access and mobility is the interest of all nations after all, because our ability to trade and improve our economies depends on that. We share interests as well in multilateralism to address regional and international challenges, especially for a developing country like the Philippines, which can never match the overwhelming power of large countries. It is only through international law that we can hope to have some measure of even formal equality. It is through the system of international law that has been established after World War II, imperfect as it is the one that gives us at least a fighting chance to secure our interests in a way that is acceptable to all without the use of force. This common interest in the international rule of law as the basis for the enduring resolution of disputes, therefore, is also common between our two countries. And we can cooperate in quite a number of activities. Defense is one. And earlier, these indications of this cooperation were mentioned. But we also have potential for cooperating in terms of maritime trade and seafaring. I note that a lot of Filipino seafarers are also now employed on board Italian ships by Italian shipping companies. The economic independence that we both need in order to really manifest our sovereignty and independence as nations is also something that we can work together on, not only in terms of the traditional land-based geopolitics, but also in terms of this relatively more complex idea of maritime geopolitics. And hopefully, through this, we can also pursue our common interests in regional and global stability, especially in these days of great uncertainty. So to conclude, let me just probably underscore again, to reiterate that the Philippines as a maritime and archipelagic nation, we do have quite extensive and legitimate maritime interests, but these are now being challenged by growing power, which has seen it fit to use power to justify its unilateral imposition of its own ideas and interests upon us. As a smaller power, the Philippines can only rely upon international law, particularly UNCLOS, to try to protect its lawful maritime rights and entitlements. And that's all we're looking for, no more, no less. And we continue to have faith in multilateralism. We continue to have faith that the international community will be able to support the Philippines' position and advocacy in this regard. And hopefully, after today, you can understand why, therefore, despite being a smaller country, we would dare to stand up to the region's great, largest and most expansive power. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Batumbakal, for your clear and insightful lecture. Your analysis of the legal and maritime geopolitical dynamics in the West Philippine Sea has certainly provided us with a rich foundation for further reflection and dialogue. Now, to offer their perspectives and scholarly reactions to the issues raised, we are honored to have with us two distinguished Italian academics. First, we will hear from Dr. Stefano Pelagi. Dr. Pelagi is currently a research fellow at the Sapienza University in Rome, specifically in the Department of History, Anthropology, Religions, Arts, and Entertainment, otherwise known by the acronym SARAS. He is also a coordinator and main researcher for the Taiwan Study Center, also of the Sapienza University of Rome. After him, Dr. Lorenzo Termine will also deliver his remarks. Dr. Termine is a Max Weber Fellow at the European University Institute, and since 2009, he has been a journalist and a member of the Italian National Association of Journalists. Now I give you Dr. Pelagi.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ms. Gadamayan. Thank you to Ambassador Imperial for inviting me today, and especially my thanks goes to Professor Batambal for his really interesting speech. I've read his work in the last weeks, kindly given by the Embassy of the Philippines, and I found a really compelling and interesting perspective. Basically, what Professor Badamlang has done over the year is building something which we can address as a methodology of marine management, which is far from being a discipline, is more an intersection, an integrated framework that combines legal doctrine and operational jurisdiction and strategic geography. Basically, something which is essential. This holistic view is kind of vital for an archipelago nation, archipelago state such as the Philippines. There are two elements which are always present in this debate in the professor work, which is the maritime mobility and the maritime jurisdiction. So basically, there are two elements, the freedom of navigation and the assertion of sovereignty. These two things which are essential, no? The need of the route. We have seen the map, which they were kind of impressive, no? The thermal route, they were that dark, almost black, no? At some point. So most of the shipping route, the worldwide shipping route, pass through those sea. And at the same time, the need to defend sovereignty and the border of their own country. So we have seen in the last slide something pretty unusual, no? We have seen attack with axe, knives, spears, rocks, and ramming, something that recall us at the time, even before this building was created, no? And still, this kind of action, we have to remember that this do still have a very clear purpose. These gray zone activities have an objective, which is building a storytelling, okay? So in the last 10 years, the storytelling, the narrative which has been communicated is that the South China Sea is a problematic area. Is a problematic area, is a contested area. We have seen from Professor slide, and we all know how international court ruled out that there is nothing contested in the South China Sea. The borders are clearly defined, okay? But still, this kind of action, this kind of narrative which is building as the South China Sea as somehow as a contested area goes exactly in this direction. What the professor itself has called the cabbage strategy, you know, this gradual exertion of administrative control without even never surpassing what is called the threshold of open conflict. So always staying lower the danger, never crossing the line of an open conflict. And this is something really, really important because we all know that in the news, listening to TV and newspaper, we don't get a real idea of what's going on. We day by day, we hear about problem in the South China Sea, but we never get to the core idea of the real problematic issue, which is clearly an actor which is acting not according to the international law. And another element which is really important in this operational framework is technology. Technology has subverted somehow the same scenario in the last 10 years. Drone and satellite-based surveillance and the geoengineering of maritime features, so basically the possibility of building new island has increased exponentially in the last 10 and 15 years. So the possibility of modifying the same morphology of the shoals and the reef is way bigger than 10 years before. So this technological modification has brought this tension to a totally new and different level. So now controlling at the sea depends mostly on technological capabilities. At the same time, we have more and more non-military actors involved in the same tension in the South China Sea. The main actor of the Chinese gray area strategy are civilian, or I mean formerly civilian actors, which are really hard to monitor and which are really hard to follow up. No, so these are a really important element and are giving us a portrait, an idea of how complicated the situation in the South China Sea is, and the necessity of a capacity building and the necessity of a maritime domain awareness and cooperative mechanism. Okay, I will leave to Lorenzo Termine a mention of how Italy can help, and if it can have some kind of role in this very delicate equilibrium in the South China Sea. But still, I would like to remember how the European Union strategy for cooperation in the Indo-Pacific clearly stress that a meaningful European naval presence in the region is essential, okay, is vital, is the main framework of the same strategy. Okay, so we're facing a very complicated issue, an issue that needs to be stressed, need to be underlined, and where protecting sea lines of communication and safeguarding commercial interests needs to go together with the need of protecting the sovereignty of all the countries involved. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pelagi. May we now call on Dr. Termine to deliver his remarks.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation. Let me do just some very heartfelt institutional greetings before I start. Of course, first of all, to Director Bartolomucci for, setting up this great event. So I started this event, this edition, because I was in the first event, and I was there, to quote The Lord of the Rings, 3,000 years ago when we started this edition. So a lot of time has passed, and I'm really happy that it's now at the conclusion. It was a great edition. And of course, my gratitude goes to the Center for American Studies, to Ambassador Imperial for the invitation, to Minister Feliciano Gatmaitan, and of course to Professor J. Batong Bakal for his presentation. I will try to follow up on Stefano's points about how Europe and how Italy is seeing the region, meaning Southeast Asia, and of course, more specifically, the Philippines in their region, and the Philippines agency in their region. Let me start from very basic, essential points. Professor Batong Bakal, I think you have really stress the point of how the Philippines are now moving on the global stage with what we can call the transparency initiative, meaning, of course, that the true strength of the Philippine strategic communication stratcom right now is to be as transparent as possible, which means to show what's going on in the West Philippine Sea and the South China Sea more generally, is also to build a general consensus around the disputes and to show how things are moving, especially due to a Chinese growing assertiveness and growing coercion. I think we can start to talk that we are way beyond simple assertiveness. We start to see full-blown aggression, as you can see in near collision incidents or collision incidents and deadly incidents, as you have shown. And the Transparency Initiative is a really, really remarkable strategy to pursue for several different reasons. The first thing is that we are now seeing the first byproducts, the first product of this transparency initiative, which are the gathering of consensus around the Philippines. The Philippines have been at the center of a huge, remarkable diplomatic momentum in the last 2 to 3 years. We are witnessing a growing a number of friendly relations of the Philippines and a growing number of coalition and partnerships in the region and outside the region. Japan, Australia, United Kingdom, of course, USA, European Union, and Italy, even if probably a lesser extent, but growing. And this was very, very clear-mindedly grasped and presented in the publication of the new national security policy, which was a remarkable advancement of the Filipino Stratcom on national security and national defense. And I think that the major focal point of this new international outlook for the Philippines is to diversify partners. So what we are talking about here is the fact that we cannot see the Philippines right now as, as a completely reduced to the partnership with the United States. There's much more there. There's much more. There are a lot of different partners, a growing number of partners, and of course, the U.S. is still the cornerstone of that network of partnerships. But on the other hand, it's growing into a wider array of friends and partners in the region and outside the region. So what we are seeing here, and I think that Professor Batong Bakal has pointed us in that direction, is that the Philippines are at the same time a regional actor and a trans-regional pivot actor, meaning that are trying to build a consensus that goes way beyond the simple region of Southeast Asia and goes across the different regions. Of course, Europe is a very important one. And Italy has a role as well. So I'm following up on Stefano's invitation to talk more about Italy. I mean, Italy is really playing a role at the moment, and it's trying to play an even greater role in the future. So there is a Navy-to-Navy dialogue that's going on. There is an MOU on defense that will likely be signed or concluded by end of the year. And of course, this is a big shout out that I'm doing to the Filipino embassy in Rome, and of course to the work that Ambassador Gio is doing back in Manila. And what I want to stress out here is that Italy and the Philippines share what we may call a dual track approach, meaning that, of course, with regards to China, there is an important deterrence effort that the Philippines are doing, and it's a multi-domain effort, because transparency is actually also a deterrence factor, meaning that when you show that everything, and when you show that you are doing things in a certain way with proper rules, with proper norms, you're also building consensus, and consensus as a deterring fact, as a deterring byproduct, as a deterring effect on rivals and foes. So there is, of course, deterrence, multi-domain deterrence, we may call that. There is, of course, a building effort towards sea denial. So the effort of building capacity to deny access to sea. But then there is also a dialogue, an ongoing dialogue between the Philippines and China, which is really, really important. And so this dual track approach, on one end, to be muscular when you need to be muscular, to be strong when you need to be strong, and on the other hand, to dialogue when you can dialogue, because there is room for maneuver on that, is really a point of strength. And the second Thomas Scholl, agreement, with all its limitation, of course, but still is a proof that you can agree on some points. Moving to the conclusion with a few points on what can Italy put on the table on these regards. I think there are so many different things that Italy can do. And I think, of course, I'm not saying anything new. I think that Ambassador Imperial is way ahead of me and really browsing and scouting all the opportunities there. But just to sum them up, of course, there is training and capacity building, and there are things going on. So the COESPU Center in Vicenza, which is a NATO Excellency Center. Actually, it's a UN Excellency Center based on stability policing initiative, is a huge training center that can do much in terms of a wide array of security threats. There is maritime domain awareness, coastal patrolling, anti-smuggling and piracy, and IW fishing, so a lot of problem related to unreported and illegal fishing, maritime search and rescue, financial crime. We have a financial police that is doing that all the time, anti-terrorism, counter transnational security threats, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. So there are a lot of things that Italy can put on the table in terms of bilateral cooperation. And of course, there is defense industry. And we know that Southeast Asia right now is diversifying its portfolio of security and military relationship. And of course, there is Fincantieri, first of all. Underwater and submarine domain is one of the point of excellency of Fincantieri, our national shipbuilding industry. There is Leonardo, who is now talking about selling Eurofighters to the Philippines. There is a defense procurement agreement. There are MOU on logistic and defense industry. There are joint exercises, as Professor Baton Bacal has mentioned. Offshore patrol vessel Morosini has participated, as well as Frigate Alpino, and Frigate Marcella have participated in joint exercise with the Philippines Navy. Who knows? Maybe in the future we're going to see Italian vessels participating in the Balikatan exercise. Who knows? And on the other hand, and I will wrap up on this, there is a huge STRATCOM, strategic communication alignment, that Italy can still do with the Philippines when it comes to UNCLOS, of course. So to set a communication based on UNCLOS, I think that Italy has done something on that, joining the Friends of UNCLOS coalition. And on the other hand, the rejection of the 9-dash line is a really strong point that Italy is doing, especially during the Italian presidency of the G7, is doing and probably will do in the next future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Termine and Dr. Pelagi, for those very deep analysis of the issues raised. They certainly gave us a lot of food for thought. And thank you also for your recommendations, which we will look into. Now we have a few minutes for an open forum. So I open the floor for your questions. If you have a question, you may wish to raise your hand so we can give you a microphone. Any questions? Yes. Please state your name, and for your question, please state it clearly, slowly, and concisely. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your speeches. First of all, I am Sofia, an Italian student of Tor Vergata, and I have a question for the ambassador of the Philippines. So since the professor has explained the problematic, let's say, relationship between the Philippines and the PRC, When he was explaining this, I immediately thought about the relationship between China and Taiwan, which is somehow similar from an international point of from an international point of view, especially regarding the control of the sea between Taiwan and China. Therefore, since there is a similar relationship, I wanted to ask you which is the relationship between the Philippines and Taiwan, if they have some similar grounds with respect to the relationship with China. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I think the similarity lies in the tensions being experienced by both areas in the South China Sea and the Taiwan Straits. But they are completely different theaters, if you ask me. The Philippines considers Taiwan as part of China. We have a one China policy. And we do recognize that eventually Taiwan needs to be part of the whole China, but we do not agree that it should be taken by force. And we have close relations with Taiwan economically and in terms of people-to-people ties. We have around 150,000 Filipino workers in Taiwan. So we're very concerned about the situation there. So if there is an invasion of Taiwan, it will be very difficult for us to evacuate all 150,000 Filipinos. And there are other Southeast Asian workers there in the hundreds of thousands as well. We continue to have good economic ties with Taiwan, especially through APEC. As you know, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and China are all member economies of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation. So that's a framework through which we can have interaction with Taiwan. So we are for a stability and for tensions to be lowered in that part of China. As you know, Taiwan is just more than 100 plus miles from our farthest northern province of Batanes. So any conflict there or an invasion could spill over to some of our outer islands. So we are preparing for that possibility.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. I hope that answers your question. Any other questions from the floor?
Yes, ma'am. Here.
Yes,
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 so-
sir. Please
Good,
state your name and
good,
your question.
good afternoon, everybody. I am Dindo. I'm a Filipino citizen living in Rome. I have a question to Professor Batumbakal of University of the Philippines. Sir, good afternoon. Okay, my question is this. The reason why countries do form or do groupings or form each other because the main reason is to protect and to secure economic-wise each other, okay, and labor, migration, etc. Like in the European Union, the battle of one is the battle of all. Unlike in the ASEAN, you fight your own battle, and if you die, we'll pray for you. I think the problem is the charter itself of the ASEAN, and that's all, sir.
Thank you for your question. Doctor, would you like to?
Hello. Yeah. Sure. First of all, I wouldn't say that the charter is the problem. I mean, the concept of the ASEAN itself, from the beginning, was meant to be a platform for economic cooperation. It was created during the time that many ASEAN countries were led by authoritarian regimes. So they expressly avoided the political aspect. No? And the hope was that by creating a regional economic community, eventually, it would essentially evolve into a similarly democratic regional community. I guess, unfortunately, time has shown that it's not as easy to create that community. So the inherent limitations of the charter, meaning its lack of attention to that, no, to that aspect, no, has essentially affected the evolution of ASEAN. Now, that being said, though, ASEAN has tried to expand into those areas, the political area as well. But the challenge now is that when you look at the Southeast Asian region, geographically, the configuration of the region is such that the geopolitical interests of each one of the members has to be different. No? The Philippines is right in the middle between China and Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore. So those insular ASEAN nations have the luxury of distance. China has to go through us first before they get to them. With respect to the other members, they're all on the continent, the Asian continent, and they have land connections, not just sea connections with China. And their interests are quite different when it comes to the waters. In fact, perhaps they're more interested in the Mekong River rather than the South China Sea. So their economic linkages as well to the different stakeholders necessarily also have to be different. So in that sense, the Philippines is unique. It's uniquely situated. It is the first in line in China's southern expansion. Its maritime interests are indeed complete and go around 360 degrees, unlike the other Southeast Asian nations. And those differences contribute now to this situation where it is very hard to simply get the entire ASEAN association to line up behind the Philippines when facing up to China. Okay, so that's unavoidable. However, it is also recognizable, and our people, I know, have been trying many different ways to try to surpass those limitations. It's not easy, but I think that from time to time we do make some progress, and hopefully by persisting, we will eventually be able to get the ASEAN to take a more prominent role, hopefully, in this issue.
Thank you very much. Yes, another question.
Yes, ma'am. Thank
Please
you.
state your name.
Good evening. I'm Klein Mendiola, law graduate in Rome Matre University. I want to borrow from Professor Pelagi his keyword, narrative, narración. And today we're talking about multilateralism, right? For my part, I did a paper on international law. So this first question is addressed to Professor Bacalpo. My professor asked me why China didn't appear at the arbitration. I was citing all the position papers, the articles, and he said, what about the opt-out? So in multilateralism, how important is, or which effect has opt-outs in treaties? We know about Brexit, we know about Denmark's position in European Union, and we were talking about European Union. So what I see as a legal scholar is effective doing treaties with opt-outs? And if so, is this code of conduct, which is what China wants, we see a unilateral negotiation, but anyhow, it's a multilateral in the region, and how other actors like Italy states, and this follow-up question is also for the other panelists, how other countries can cope to solve the dilemma in legal, theoretical sphere and also in practical sphere, so in political sphere. We dealt about cooperation on different types of cooperation, but we know that in European Union level, we have also problems when we try to build a consensus. So how we cope with this? So the question is for all, actually.
Okay, thank you. With respect to the first part of the question about the opt-out provisions in international treaties, first, I think we have to recall the reason why there are opt-out provisions in many treaties. Historically, That is because it is based on the very concept of a treaty being an agreement between sovereign states. And up to the present, so state sovereignty remains supreme. The presumption is no state can be subject to the power of any other entity other than itself. And therefore, in entering into treaties, into agreements, it is that power is also manifested in what it agrees to and what it decides not to agree to. And the opt-out provision in treaties is, in a way, an expression and acknowledgement of that sovereignty. However, as the international community has evolved and as treaty practice has also evolved, states have also realized the importance of reducing the arbitrariness of states, shall we say, if you're giving them just total absolute sovereignty and not caring about the other principles in treaty law, such as pacta sunt servanda. Okay. They have come to realize that in many instances, it is also necessary to limit the ability of the states to opt out. So it cannot be just, on a whim. And in UNCLOS, that is also manifested. No? There are opt-out provisions in UNCLOS. That's very clear. However, even the invocation and recognition that the state can opt out has to go through certain standards and processes. And in the case of the Philippines versus China, whether or not China could use those opt-out provisions to avoid being subject to the jurisdiction of the tribunal was one of the key threshold questions for the tribunal itself. That's why in the first part of its proceedings in the judgment on jurisdiction, precisely that question was answered by the tribunal. That yes, China did exercise some of these opt-out clauses, but despite that, they did not apply to the dispute that was put before the tribunal. And that means again that given that the opt-out provisions does not apply, the principle of pacta sunt servanda demands that China must therefore comply with the jurisdiction and the rulings of the tribunal. Unfortunately, it still hasn't. And the reason for that is no longer legal, but political. When you look at the entire concept of the rule of law for the Communist Party of China, the law must always be an instrument of the party. It can never go against the party. And that attitude is what is reflected in its attitude towards international law as well. No? That's why, for example, the agreements between China and the United Kingdom about Hong Kong, once it became convenient for them to ignore it, they did. Similarly now in UNCLOS, now that the situation have changed and they're the maritime power, they decided that they will not restrain themselves from deciding that these smaller countries around them have no exclusive economic zones because it's contrary to their interests. And for the Philippines, it's even more problematic for them because despite being a smaller nation, we dare to challenge that power. So it's there that you'll find the answer. The need to really distinguish when it's about law and when it's really just about power. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Thank you very much. Let me know if I got it right. Are you asking what's the Italian position of the code of conduct negotiations, right? Okay. Of course, I cannot state any official position. I'm not a diplomat. What I can tell you is that so Italy and the European Union are both developmental partners to ASEAN. So of course there is a strong support for what ASEAN is doing. So this is the first point. On the other hand, let me be very frank on this. It's really hard to talk to ASEAN because of course, as a lower institutionalized mechanism of settling disputes and tensions among members, and these of course leave much room to bilateral relations, very much room to bilateral relations. But on this note, what I want to stress out is that the Italian G7 presidency has clearly stated in the Borgo Egnazia final communique and also in the Fuji communique, and I will also I also want to stress out that the Philippines were invited to the Bolganyatsia meeting. So that was a huge signal of where you leaning. So the guys that you invite at the table when you do summits is a huge message of where you are leaning towards. And the final communique was really clear on supporting the maintenance of the status quo in the South China Sea. So that's one point. On the other hand, easily supports the 2016 ruling arbitration, so the final award. So when you match these things together, when you combine these things together, you can understand what's the Italian position on the dispute. But when it comes to the conduct, I'm not so sure that there is an Italian position on the thing, because it's something that is really left to ASEAN members, and is really, there is not really a strong position on the need for a code of conduct itself. Thank you.
I will try to keep up from a different perspective from what you were asking. So I'm not a legal expert, but I'll try to put it in the framework of history of international relations. So we do have an actor, which is an actor that is, we can call a revisionist actor, which is clearly trying not to subvert the hegemonic order as we know it, but it is clearly trying to modify it, no? An actor which is China. And in the past, this has happened several times, not on the global stage, but on the regional stage. And most of the time, these modification happen exactly subverting or modifying dispute, border dispute, international court decision, and so on. So I don't know how this is going to happen, but this is clearly something which define, if we need any more evidence, China as a revisionist power. What is happening in the South China Sea? PRC 10 years ago, even 2016, at the time of the ruling, is a very different actor from what it is now. So the concept of the dimension of the storytelling is really important, because it is even something that help shaping in the mind of Beijing. It is something that might help to shape future action on the South China Sea, or can support different decision over the same court ruling. So this is not from a legal perspective, just from history of international relations perspective. Hope I somehow give you an insight on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our speakers. I think we only have time for one more question. Does anybody want to raise another question? Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Demetrio Rafanan, a domestic helper here in Rome. I am reading one of the mission of the United Nations, and its work is to ensure that international law is respected and upheld. So we heard that the UNCLOS is part of the United Nations, and it's awarded that the West Philippine Sea, part of our disputed lands, is awarded to the Philippines. Now, since China is not respecting international laws, do we think, this is a question to all of us, do we think that the United Nations is a failure? Since it cannot enforce the international laws. Thank you.
Okay, of course, that's a very complex question, and there are many different perspectives on that. I think that at this point, the international community itself can be asked that question. And the thing is, the international community continues to also evolve and learn. The United Nations, despite its many decades in existence, also still needs to evolve as well. We've seen that in terms of its mandates, yes, it has had many successes, but it has also had its share of failures. And that's simply part and parcel of its, its existence. We are trying to build, after all, an international community, trying to establish an institution that addresses all of the interests of many different varied nations. And it will not be able to do it in an instant. And the only thing we can do is to try to keep it, maintain it, because despite all of its flaws, it's still the only system we have right now with which we can make things work. And hopefully, with respect to some of its successes, well, after all, it has been able to prevent World War III so far. And even though there were still many conflicts, it was able to, influence the development of many nations, especially after World War II, and was able to create systems such as World Health Organization, UNICEF, etc., to try to also assist those disadvantaged new states to become full-fledged members of the international community. So there are successes. We can only hope to try to keep it that way and try to improve it as we go on. We cannot just simply say that it's a failure and therefore we give up and start something new. Especially now in this period of great uncertainty, I don't think that would be a very good idea because it will only increase the uncertainty that right now is already presenting great challenges to us. So yeah, I guess that's it. I wouldn't call it a failure. I would call it still very much a work in progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. J. Batumbakal. And thank you everyone who participated in today's open forum and lecture. Your thoughtful questions and reflections have truly enriched our discussions and demonstrated the importance of continued dialogue on these complex and pressing issues. At this point, we have come to the final part of our program. On behalf of the Embassy of the Republic of the Philippines, I would like to sincerely thank all of you for joining us today for this meaningful lecture. We are deeply grateful to Dr. J. Batumbakal for sharing his deep expertise and critical insights on maritime law, multilateralism, and the challenges we collectively face in safeguarding the international legal order, particularly in the context of the West Philippine Sea. We also extend our heartfelt thanks to our distinguished reactors, Dr. Stefano Pelagi and Dr. Lorenzo Termine, for their thoughtful responses that added depth and valuable academic perspective to our conversation. Our appreciation also goes to our partners at Festival de la Diplomacia and the other patrons and sponsors of the festival for their continued collaboration, and to all our guests. Today's discussion is a strong reminder that multilateralism, while under strain, remains vital. As the theme of this year's festival emphasizes, the cost of principles may be high, but it is one worth upholding in the pursuit of peace, security, and the rule of law. Once again, thank you for being a part of today's event, and we will see you again next year.
Take a picture.